in a small, quiet town nestled in the heart of America, a traveling circus arrived, bringing with it an air of excitement and wonder. The townsfolk eagerly awaited the performances, unaware of the sinister intentions lurking behind the grease-paint smiles of the clowns. The night was alive with the sounds of laughter and applause as the circus performers dazzled the audience with their tricks and stunts. Among them were the clowns, who seemed to have a special knack for making the children giggle and the adults chuckle. But behind the jovial masks and colorful costumes, a dark secret festered. After the final act, when the circus tents were being dismantled and the audience had gone home, the clowns gathered in their small van, parked inconspicuously behind the big top. They exchanged glances, their eyes gleaming with a predatory hunger. This was the time they had been waiting for. "Tonight's the night," said Jacko, the leader of the group, his voice a low growl. "Let's find our next victim." The other clowns nodded in agreement, their faces twisted into grotesque smiles. They drove slowly through the deserted streets, their van a silent predator in the dark. They spotted a lone figure walking home from the circus, a young woman who had lingered a bit too long. Jacko gave a signal and the van pulled up alongside her. Before she could react, the door slid open, and two clowns jumped out, grabbing her and pulling her inside. Her screams were muffled by a hand over her mouth as the van sped away into the night. Back at their hideout, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, the clowns reveled in their sadistic ritual. The woman's fate was sealed as they carried out their gruesome act, the sound of gunshots echoing in the empty space. When they were done, they disposed of the body, confident that their secret would remain hidden. Little did they know, an old lady named Mrs. Thompson had been suspicious of the clowns for some time. She had seen the van lurking around the circus and decided to keep an eye on it. That night, she had followed them discreetly and witnessed the horrific scene from a distance, capturing it all on her phone. Mrs. Thompson knew she had to act quickly. She planned to take the evidence to the police first thing in the morning. But as she made her way back home, her heart pounding with fear and determination, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The following morning, Mrs. Thompson woke up early, her mind racing with the events of the previous night. She knew the clowns were dangerous and cunning, but she had to do what was right. With trembling hands, she copied the video from her phone to a USB drive and placed it in her purse. She was determined to get to the police station as soon as possible. Meanwhile, the clowns were already stirring. Jacko had an uneasy feeling, a sense that something wasn't right. He called a meeting in the cramped space of their van. "Something's off," he said, his eyes narrowing. "We were too loud last night. Someone might have seen or heard something." The other clowns exchanged nervous glances. They knew the risks of their gruesome hobby, but the thrill was too intoxicating to resist. Jacko continued, "We need to find out if anyone saw us. Keep your eyes and ears open, and remember, if anyone suspects anything, we deal with them." As Mrs. Thompson made her way to the police station, she felt a chill run down her spine. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being followed. She quickened her pace, clutching her purse tightly. The streets were unusually empty, adding to her sense of unease. Just as she was about to reach the police station, a hand grabbed her shoulder. She gasped and turned around to see a man standing behind her, his face partially obscured by a hood. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice trembling. The man leaned in closer, his breath hot against her ear. "You know too much, old lady. You should have minded your own business." Before Mrs. Thompson could react, he snatched her purse and ran off into a nearby alley. She screamed for help, but there was no one around to hear her. Desperate, she chased after the man, but he was too fast. Her heart sank as she realized her only evidence was gone. At the same time, back at the circus grounds, the clowns were growing increasingly paranoid. They had heard whispers among the townsfolk about a mysterious van and suspicious activities. Jacko's mind raced as he tried to piece together what might have happened. "We need to find that old lady," he said, his voice filled with urgency. "She might have something on us. Spread out and look for her. And if you find her, bring her to me." The clowns dispersed, blending into the shadows as they searched for Mrs. Thompson. She, meanwhile, had returned to her house, her mind reeling with fear and frustration. She had to find another way to get the evidence to the police. As she sat at her kitchen table, contemplating her next move, she heard a knock at the door. Her heart skipped a beat as she cautiously approached the door. "Who is it?" she called out, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's Officer Collins," came the reply. "We received a report about a robbery. Are you all right?" Relief washed over Mrs. Thompson as she opened the door to find a police officer standing on her porch. "Thank goodness you're here," she said, ushering him inside. "I have something to show you. Something important." She led Officer Collins to her living room and explained everything, showing him the remaining copy of the video on her phone. His expression grew serious as he watched the footage. "This is damning evidence," he said. "We need to get you to the station immediately. You're not safe here." As they made their way to the police station, Officer Collins couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He drove cautiously, taking back roads and frequently checking the rearview mirror. Mrs. Thompson clutched her phone tightly, her eyes darting nervously. At the station, they were greeted by Detective Harper, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for solving difficult cases. He listened intently as Mrs. Thompson recounted her story and watched the video evidence. "This is indeed serious," Detective Harper said. "We need to act fast. These clowns are more dangerous than we thought." Detective Harper immediately organized a team to start investigating the clowns and their van. Officers were dispatched to the circus grounds to keep an eye on the performers, while others were tasked with tracking down any witnesses who might have seen or heard anything suspicious. Back at the circus, the clowns were growing more desperate. They sensed the noose tightening around them. Jacko, ever the leader, called another meeting in their van. "We need to find that old lady," he said, his voice filled with menace. "If she's gone to the police, we're done for. Split up and search every inch of this town. Don't come back until you find her." The clowns nodded and dispersed, their faces twisted into expressions of determination and fear. They knew that their freedom, and possibly their lives, depended on silencing Mrs. Thompson. Mrs. Thompson, now safe at the police station, provided a detailed description of the clowns and their van. Detective Harper and his team began cross-referencing the information with any previous reports of suspicious activity. It didn't take long for a pattern to emerge. Similar incidents had occurred in other towns the circus had visited. "We've got them," Harper said, slamming his hand on the table. "They've been doing this for months, maybe even years. We need to move quickly and quietly. They can't know we're onto them." As the police gathered more evidence and prepared for a raid, the clowns continued their frantic search for Mrs. Thompson. One of the clowns, a wiry man known as Bobo, managed to track down a neighbor who had seen Mrs. Thompson talking to a police officer. Bobo reported back to Jacko, who immediately formulated a plan. "We need to get to that police station," Jacko said. "If she's there, we'll find a way to get her, and if she's not, we'll find out where she is." Under the cover of darkness, the clowns made their way to the police station, their van parked a safe distance away. They observed the station, noting the comings and goings of the officers. Jacko decided they needed a distraction to draw the officers out. The clowns set fire to a nearby abandoned building, causing chaos and drawing the attention of the police. As officers rushed to the scene, Jacko and Bobo slipped into the station, their faces concealed by hoods. They moved quickly and silently through the corridors, searching for Mrs. Thompson. In the interrogation room, Mrs. Thompson and Detective Harper were deep in conversation when the fire alarm went off. Harper glanced at the monitor showing the fire outside. "Stay here," he instructed Mrs. Thompson. "I'll be right back." As soon as Harper left the room, the door swung open and Jacko and Bobo stepped inside. Mrs. Thompson gasped, her eyes wide with fear. "You won't get away with this," she whispered, clutching her phone tightly. Jacko smiled coldly. "Oh, but we already have," he said, advancing toward her. "Now hand over that phone." Before Mrs. Thompson could react, Bobo lunged at her, grabbing her arm. She struggled, but he was too strong. Just as Jacko was about to snatch the phone from her hand, Detective Harper burst back into the room, gun drawn. "Freeze!" Harper shouted. "Let her go!" Jacko and Bobo exchanged a glance, then reluctantly released Mrs. Thompson. Harper motioned for them to step back, his gun never wavering. "You're under arrest," he said. "Don't try anything stupid." Backup officers soon arrived, and Jacko and Bobo were handcuffed and led out of the station. Mrs. Thompson, though shaken, was relieved. "Thank you," she said to Harper. "I thought they were going to kill me." Harper nodded. "You're safe now, ma'am. We'll make sure they pay for what they've done." With Jacko and Bobo in custody, the police launched a full-scale raid on the circus grounds. The remaining clowns were rounded up, and the van was impounded. Inside, the police found evidence linking them to the string of murders, including weapons and personal items belonging to the victims. As news of the arrests spread, the town breathed a collective sigh of relief. The nightmare was finally over. Mrs. Thompson was hailed as a hero for her bravery and quick thinking, and Detective Harper was commended for his swift action. Despite the clown's arrest, the town remained on edge. The circus was dismantled, and the grounds were abandoned, leaving a chilling reminder of the horrors that had taken place. Mrs. Thompson, though hailed as a hero, struggled to sleep at night, haunted by the images of what she had witnessed. Detective Harper, meanwhile, was busy piecing together the full extent of the clown's crimes. As he delved deeper into their past, he uncovered a network of terror that spanned multiple states. The clowns had been careful, covering their tracks and moving frequently, but they had finally slipped up. One afternoon, Harper received a call from an officer in a neighboring town. "We found something you might want to see," the officer said. "A storage unit rented under one of the clown's aliases. It's full of evidence, personal items, videotapes, even journals." Harper immediately drove to the neighboring town, accompanied by a team of officers. Inside the storage unit, they found a trove of chilling artifacts. The videotapes documented the clown's murders in gruesome detail, while the journals provided insights into their twisted minds. As Harper sifted through the evidence, one entry in particular caught his attention. It was written by Jacko, the leader of the clowns, and detailed his growing paranoia and fear of being caught. Harper read aloud. "We're getting sloppy. I can feel them closing in on us. The thrill is still there, but so is the fear. Every night I see their faces in my dreams. The ones we've taken, the ones who will never see another sunrise. It's only a matter of time before they catch up to us. I have to be prepared. I have to have an escape plan." Harper's mind raced as he considered the implications. Was it possible that Jacko had a contingency plan, a way to escape if things went south? He instructed his team to double-check all the evidence, looking for any clues that might point to an escape route or hidden hideout. Back in town, Mrs. Thompson was slowly beginning to regain a sense of normalcy. She started to feel safer knowing the clowns were behind bars, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the ordeal wasn't over. One evening, she received an unexpected visitor, Detective Harper. "Mrs. Thompson," Harper said, his expression serious, "we found something that might interest you." He handed her a journal, its pages filled with Jacko's meticulous handwriting. "This is Jacko's. It details everything they've done, and it mentions you. He was aware of you long before that night." Mrs. Thompson shuddered as she read the chilling words. "What does this mean? Am I still in danger?" Harper sighed. "We're not sure. We've uncovered evidence suggesting Jacko might have had an escape plan. We need to be vigilant until we're certain he has no way out." Days turned into weeks, and the investigation continued. The police worked tirelessly to ensure every clown was accounted for and that there were no loose ends. Meanwhile, Mrs. Thompson became a local celebrity, her bravery a beacon of hope for the community. Then, one night, Harper received a frantic call from the jail. "Detective, you need to get down here immediately. Jacko and Bobo, they've escaped." Harper's heart sank. He raced to the jail where chaos reigned. The two clowns had somehow managed to overpower a guard and slip away into the night. A massive manhunt was launched, but Jacko and Bobo seemed to have vanished without a trace. Mrs. Thompson was placed under protective custody, her house now guarded around the clock. She tried to remain calm, but the fear was overwhelming. She knew Jacko wouldn't give up easily. As the days passed with no sign of the escaped clowns, Harper began to fear the worst. Jacko was cunning and ruthless, and if he had a plan, he would follow it through to the end. Harper spent sleepless nights reviewing the evidence, looking for any hint of where they might have gone. Finally, a breakthrough came. One of the journals contained a crude map detailing a remote cabin deep in the woods, a potential hideout. Harper immediately organized a team and set out to investigate. The journey to the cabin was treacherous, the dense forest making progress slow. As they neared the location marked on the map, Harper's heart pounded. He knew this could be their last chance to catch Jacko and Bobo before they disappeared for good. When they reached the cabin, they found it abandoned, but recent signs of activity were evident. Inside, they discovered more journals and plans, indicating Jacko had been preparing for this escape for years. Harper realized they were always one step behind, and it frustrated him. But as they searched the cabin, one of the officers found a clue, a receipt for a purchase made in a nearby town just a few days ago. It was a small lead, but it was something. Harper and his team immediately headed to the town, hoping to finally corner the elusive clowns.
Arriving in the nearby town, Harper and his team split up to search for any signs of Jacko and Bobo. They showed the clowns' photos to local shopkeepers, motel owners, and anyone who might have seen them. It wasn't long before a lead emerged. A gas station attendant recognized the clowns from their pictures. "Yeah, they were here a couple of days ago," he said. "Bought a bunch of supplies and asked for directions to a place called Blackwood Grove. Said they were going camping." Harper's pulse quickened. Blackwood Grove was a dense, secluded forest area known for its rugged terrain. It would be the perfect place to hide. He thanked the attendant and quickly regrouped with his team. "We've got a lead," Harper announced. "They were last seen heading toward Blackwood Grove. Let's move out." The drive to Blackwood Grove was tense. Harper knew the clowns were desperate and dangerous, and there was no telling what they might do if cornered. As they approached the entrance to the grove, the team prepared for the worst. They split into smaller groups to cover more ground, moving cautiously through the thick underbrush. The forest was eerily quiet, every snap of a twig and rustle of leaves putting everyone on edge. Harper led one of the groups, his eyes scanning the surroundings for any signs of movement. Hours passed with no sign of the clowns. Just as frustration began to set in, one of the officers radioed in. "Detective Harper, we found something. A campsite about 2 clicks north of your location." Harper and his team quickly made their way to the site. As they approached, they could see the remnants of the fire and scattered supplies. It was clear someone had been there recently. "Spread out and search the area," Harper ordered. "They can't be far." As the officers combed through the forest, Harper's instinct spoke. He knew Jacko was clever and wouldn't leave without fighting. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out, followed by a scream. Harper's heart raced and he ran toward the sound. He found one of his officers on the ground, bleeding from a gunshot. "They're here," the officer gasped. "They ambushed us." Harper's eyes narrowed as he called for backup and instructed his team to proceed with extreme caution. He knew they were walking into the trap. Moving stealthily. Harper and his team closed in on the clown's position. Another gunshot rang out, narrowly missing Harper's head. He ducked behind a tree, returning fire in the direction of the shot. "Jacko! Bobo! It's over!" Harper shouted. "Come out with your hands up!" A cold laugh echoed through the trees. "You think you can catch us, Harper?" Jacko's voice paused. "We've been evading you for years. You won't stop us now." Harper's jaw clenched as he signaled his team to fight the clown. He could see movement ahead and knew they were close. Taking a deep breath, he stepped out from behind a tree, his gun aimed and ready. The forest erupted into chaos at full speed. Harper's focus was unyielding as he advanced, determined to bring the clowns to justice. He caught sight of Bobo, who was reloading his weapon, and fired. Bobo dropped to the ground, clutching his blade. taught me, Harper, but you'll never understand the thrill, the excitement. You'll never know what it's like. Harper shook his head. With any of you here around the room, your reign of terror is over. With both clowns in custody, the officers regrouped and escorted them back to the town. The residents of the small town breathed a collective sigh of relief as news of the capture spread. Mrs. Thompson, who under Detective Harper's was finally able to rest easy, knowing the night had closed.
Back at the police station, Jacko and Bobo were processed and placed in maximum security cells. The evidence gathered from the cabin and their hideout in Blackwood Grove was overwhelming. Detective Harper and his team worked tirelessly to ensure the case was airtight, leaving no room for the clowns to escape justice. Mrs. Thompson was finally able to return home, her bravery and quick thinking having played a crucial role in bringing the clowns to justice. The town held a small ceremony in her honor, presenting her with a plaque and a heartfelt thank you from the community. Though she was grateful for the recognition, Mrs. Thompson knew it would take time to heal from the trauma she had endured. Detective Harper visited her the day after the ceremony. "Mrs. Thompson, I just wanted to thank you again for your courage. Without you, we might not have caught them." She smiled, though her eyes still held a hint of sadness. "I just did what I had to do. I'm glad it's over." Harper nodded. "If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. The department owes you a debt of gratitude." As the weeks turned into months, the trial of Jacko and Bobo became a media sensation. The courtroom was packed every day, reporters clamoring for any detail they could get. The prosecution laid out the evidence meticulously, painting a chilling picture of the clown's reign of terror. Jacko, ever the showman, attempted to use the trial as a platform, but his efforts were quickly shut down by the judge. Bobo remained silent, his gaze fixed on the floor, seemingly resigned to his fate. After weeks of testimony and evidence presentation, the jury deliberated for only a few hours before returning with a verdict: guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted in a mix of relief and satisfaction. Jacko and Bobo were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring they would never harm anyone again. For Detective Harper, the case was a career-defining moment. He had faced one of the most challenging investigations of his life and had come out victorious. But he knew the scars left by the clowns would linger in the community for years to come. As the town began to move forward, Harper received an unexpected call from the FBI. They were impressed with his handling of the case and offered him a position as a special agent. After much consideration, Harper decided to accept, seeing it as an opportunity to continue making a difference on a larger scale. Before leaving for his new position, Harper visited Mrs. Thompson one last time. "I wanted to let you know that I'll be moving on to a new role with the FBI," he said. "But I'll always be grateful for the role you played in this case." Mrs. Thompson smiled warmly. "Thank you, Detective Harper. You've done so much for this town. I wish you the best of luck." Harper shook her hand. "Take care, Mrs. Thompson. Stay safe." As he walked away, Harper felt a sense of closure. The clowns were behind bars, the town was healing, and he was ready for the next chapter in his life. Years later, the story of the clowns and their reign of terror became the subject of books and documentaries. The town, though forever changed, found a way to honor the victims and celebrate the resilience of those who had survived. Mrs. Thompson continued to live her life with quiet strength, forever known as the woman who helped bring down the clowns. And Detective Harper, now a seasoned FBI agent, carried the lessons of the case with him, always vigilant, always ready to face the darkness that lurked in the shadows.